welcome to the Down South Hunting Podcast. I'm Adam Cruz with Mike Higman. Mike, this is the intro, but for me, I'm going to get to listen to this for the first time because I wasn't able to join you.
Yeah, you missed a good talk with Brian Grossman of QDMA. He's their communications manager, and we talked about a lot of stuff. So I'll just warn you ahead of time. This one goes a little bit long. We cover a lot of different stuff, so I promise you there's going to be something in there that you are interested in. But the major topics we talked about was hunting on public, private, and on leases, just kind of comparing what they are and what the advantages of each one is. And Brian has a lot of experience with a lot of those things. And then we got into some tactics a little bit at the end because I just couldn't let him go, an experienced public land guy. So, of course, we know you tacked on probably another 20 minutes at the end, just like how he does things, because it's fun talking about hunting.
You know, we talked about having Brian on literally last April or May when either we were talking about starting the podcast or after we got it launched, and we wanted to have him at QDMA and we were at the convention. Couldn't make that happen. Been wanting to have him on for a solid year, and then tonight I literally have, or I guess yesterday, I had a customer call and say, "Hey, want to have dinner with you guys out on the road traveling," and I could not turn down this dinner, so I was very disappointed. I wasn't able to make the call, but looking forward to hearing it, Brian and Kyle. So, yeah.
I hope you sold like at least $1 billion of welding supplies tonight.
You would be happy to know I did sell some stuff, so right. It worked out okay. We made some money off that.
Well, that's good.
Yes.
You know, your new bigwig job promotion is really is putting some pressure on the Down South Hunting Podcast. But man, I'm happy that you're doing well.
I appreciate it, man. And the podcast is doing well. It's actually doing better than it ever has. So
yeah, that's right.
I don't know what the lift's coming from.
We got some exciting news. I'm gonna let you break it. What is I think this is the biggest news we've had since the start of the podcast. So let's let everybody know.
Okay. It is the biggest news, and it's really the biggest news for you and I, but it's also big news for the listeners too. So we were approached by Onyx Maps, and we are now in a sponsorship type partnership with them, and they are considered our title sponsor now. So I'm beyond excited, man. I've been using Onyx, I don't even know how long, definitely before it was cool. I found out about it when I was going on my first Western hunt, and I have dug my nose and my heels into that app ever since. There's a lot of really good mapping softwares and apps out there, but I use the app. I use it on the computer. I link the two up. I mean, even when I'm on planes, I've literally got maps downloaded to my phone, and I'm looking for hunting spots. So to say that we're excited would be a complete understatement.
Yeah. And I'm pretty new to Onyx. I started using it earlier this year. I had been using a different phone app for a while, and this other phone app actually went to a different system and platform and revenue model. So it worked out really well. I think I would have switched to Onyx anyway, having learned more about it. But it worked out well that my old system wasn't going to work well anyway. And I've got a ton to learn about it. So I've been using it some already. There's a lot of different I feel like there's so many different ways to use it. It's easy to think of it as, okay, well, you can see where the property line's at, wherever you're standing. But there's so many features, and I know I haven't even scratched the surface of what it's capable of. So I'm really excited about just kind of diving deep into it and learning more about it. You know, it's really affordable. It's not one of those things where because if you get the whole country, it's like $100, but you can get your state for $30. Yeah. And the tools that's available for all the money we spend on hunting, you know, I just think I'm really, really excited that they started partnering up with us, and not just from like a sponsorship only, but as far as like what we can tap into as far as what they've got as a program.
For sure, man. I've literally been pushing their product since the day that I started using it online. So it's nice to make the marriage official. That's the way I feel about it.
And let me tell you, they are committed to becoming a major part of hunting. One of the reasons they approach us is they specifically want to reach out to Southern hunters. I think the word has been out west for a long time. Like you said, when you did that Western hunt is how you found out about it. But I think it's going to become a staple in a lot of hunters' plans and scouting and that kind of stuff all through the country.
Yeah, man. I mean, for us Southerners, I'll use one real quick example about, an out of the box way to use this. So I've got some hard to access land and really like trying to navigate it and figure out how far away it is from point A to point B. I mean, they've got ways that you can figure out the actual how many feet it is from point A to point B. And not only that, but you can map out, like, if you're hunting islands, you can shape that island out and tell how many acres it is, and obviously how many feet wide and long. Just so many tools inside the app that it's just really handy, man, to have. Every hunter literally should have this in their toolbox, without a doubt.
So obviously there's got to be some more in it. We said it's a good thing for our listeners. So we are working on something really cool coming up. Hopefully we can announce it next week. But we've got something that we're going to be working with onX on that is really going to benefit our listeners. So make sure you stay tuned for that. We'll be announcing it on social media as well. But probably the next time you'll hear about this is when we release the next episode, which, a lot of times we got stuff lined up in the can. That's industry talk for already recorded, by the
way. Yes. Already ready to release.
But with the QDMA convention coming up next week, I'm not even sure exactly what the exact day we're going to release it, but look for it sometime in the next 10 days. So keep an eye on the feed. Make sure you're subscribed, because if you're subscribed, you're going to get it automatically anyway. But we'll announce it on social media as well once that podcast comes out. The other thing that's going to be really good for the listeners is this is going to cause us to have to be a little bit more regular.
Yes.
The last few weeks have been tough. Adam, you got that promotion. I am launching my Amazon products business. So that has really been eating up a ton of my time besides my regular day job and hunting gear deals. So I've had a lot on my plate, but I'm not forgetting about down south hunting, and we are not slowing down. This is just the beginning of us growing. So we got some stuff to be really excited about.
Yeah, this has kind of been our off season too, but we're ramped back up for deer season. I mean, I know both of us have already been taking steps to prepare for deer season. I put a new 60X custom string on my bow a couple of weeks ago. Took that down to my archery shop. Last weekend, I was throwing some minerals out for deer down on a private property that I have access to, and some trail cams. So, man, I know that I'm ready for deer season, and I know we're ready to start talking about deer hunting. So before we break into the interview, why don't you give us a quick update what you've been doing here lately?
Yeah, so I got my hunts lined up for public land here in Florida. I think we talked about this before. I'm not going to be able to hunt that same private land that I hunted last year, which is a little disappointing. But I'm excited about getting back on some public land again this year. So I know some of those properties. No, I'm not going to share exactly where they are yet. But
did you have to draw a tag? Or buy a leftover? One of the two?
Yeah, so there's some like, so here in Florida, a lot of people call them romping stomps, where you just kind of like, you just basically show up. And as long as you got a management area permit, you can hunt them. You don't need a special opportunity permit or a quota permit. So those, basically when the season's open, anybody can just show up. So there's some of those that I hunt all the time. But then they also did the drawing for the quota hunts. So I've got a couple really good opportunities. Basically those opportunities give you a better chance at a mature deer because they're not super pressured, and usually there's some better habitat in that type area. So I'm excited about a couple of these hunts I got coming up. And then the other thing is, I was gifted my father-in-law's bow that he had. It's not super new or anything, but it's way newer than the one I was using. So I got to get that up and running. It's a PSE Rogue Pro Series. So if anybody has any info on that bow and wants to share it with me, I really don't know anything about it. I just got it this past weekend when I was at a family reunion, so I haven't been able to even take it out of the case yet. So hit me up on social media if you got any info on that. So I'm excited about that. I got to get got to get shooting that thing and get used to it.
Man,
What else
okay,
you
I
got,
got.
Adam?
Well, that's my main thing. I mean, I've prepared for some public land hunts. That private land hunt is actually taking place in August. So Tennessee, I think we'll talk more about this in upcoming podcasts, but I have 3 days in August, October, I think 26th through the 29th that I can actually hunt, which is very odd. Tennessee's never done anything like this before. Obviously, if you're familiar with summertime patterns, deer are very patternable at that time. I don't have any type of ag to hunt over on private land. This is a private land only hunt Tennessee's released. But, as long as the minerals meet the TWRA standards, which I'm definitely going to be checking out, making sure that I'm completely legal, all game wardens out there. But, they will be at a point to where if you can find some good deer, they might be very killable at this time of year. So I'm really looking forward to that, man. And I have one more question for you on your public land, and we haven't really talked about this last year, but do you run trail cameras on your public land properties?
Yes. So I don't have any out right now, and so usually I can't do anything until I know where I'm going to be hunting. So now I've kind of got that idea. I'm not sure. I don't have a specific plan as to when I'm going to set them out. I'm thinking maybe August. So we need to do a whole episode about this. So I know sometime in the next month, we'll do an episode about what our plans are for the season, because I'm going to do some things a little differently this year. So let's talk about that later, because we've got a real long episode coming up. One last thing we got to touch on is the QDMA convention coming up. I'm going to be there. Kyle's going to be there. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to make it. No. So, but if anybody's going to be around, please contact me on social media. I just had somebody text me and say he's going to be in the area, so we're going to try to get together Thursday night. But I'm hoping Friday night, after the little banquet there, we can go to a local bar and hang out or something. So if you're going to be around, let me know. And I'd like to have some other hunters from the south to talk hunting with while we're down there. So you can. Maybe I'll put something on the Hunting in the South group, so you can comment on that, or just contact me on social media. If you contact any of the down south accounts, Ab and I both check those, or shoot us an email if you don't do social media. So that's about it. We got to jump into this interview, because this is gonna be a 2-hour episode.
I can't wait. Let's get it rolling.
All right, man. All right, I'm excited. We got Brian Grossman from the QDMA on the line. He is their communications manager, and he also runs a website, Georgia Afield. And Brian's one of those guys that, as soon as we started the podcast, knew somebody we needed to have on the show. And, it's hard to get everybody in and just build the right topics and that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited we finally get to talk to him. Brian, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on.
Can you just start out, basically, I'm always interested to see, somebody that's working in the deer hunting industry, and especially guys with a QDMA. I know you have a wildlife management degree. Can you kind of go through, how you got started, basically a little bit about how you started hunting, and then kind of get into like how your schooling went and your career in deer, first of all?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm kind of, I guess, came from a bit of a non-traditional hunter background, or at least no one in my family hunted. And I just always, from the time I was a little kid, just enjoyed the outdoors, exploring, always had an interest in wildlife. And so around the age of 13, I decided that I wanted to hunt. So, fortunately, I was brought up in a home. My dad was a state trooper in Kentucky, so I had been brought up around firearms and taught to shoot and gun safety and all that. So, when I told my dad I wanted to try hunting, he was willing, and got me we had a shotgun from hand me down from my grandparents, or both my grandfathers at one time hunted, but had stopped doing that, years before. And so they just, my dad kind of turned me loose on squirrels. And then I got a bow and started chasing deer, and just the passion kind of grew from there. And so much so that I decided I wanted to pursue a career pertaining to hunting or wildlife management, and went to Murray State University in Western Kentucky and got a degree in wildlife management, and was fortunate enough to get on with Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife shortly after graduating, and worked on a wildlife management area, taking care of it, and just kind of went from there. I did that for several years. Eventually went to a biologist position, a small game biologist position, and then eventually ended up down here in Georgia working for the DNR, managing several wildlife management areas. And that's when opportunity came up to work for QDMA, and it was a big change of gears going from being outdoors and actually hands-on wildlife management to sit behind a computer doing social media and website stuff, which I'd been doing that all along on the side, just something I had an interest in. But I just jumped at that opportunity to be involved with QDMA, and been there, I guess, about 3 years now.
Well, Brian, hearing that, there's already a ton of questions. I got so many in my mind. And what I wanted to talk to you about tonight is basically comparing hunting public land, hunting private land, and hunting leases. Three different, I guess, those are probably the options all over the country, but all three of those are real popular options across the South. And we wanted to talk about basically what the advantages and disadvantages of each one is, and how you can take advantage of all three of those, hopefully in different seasons. But before we get to that, I'm getting really excited. I had checked your website earlier today, and I saw in Georgia, I know there's only 59 days left until bow season opens up. Here in Florida, there's some places where it opens up sooner. So I'm already getting real pumped for that. But I do want to touch on how'd your turkey season go this year?
Oh man, that's a sore subject. Yeah, it was pretty slow. I didn't end up filling a tag this season. It just didn't work. I didn't get out near as much as I have in the past, just through work and family obligations. But when I did, man, it was just really an odd season here. Just not a lot of gobbling, not near as much as in the past. And of course, the birds that I could get to gobble on the roost hit the ground and shut up, and just never could make it happen.
What kind of property do you hunt for turkey?
I'm pretty much a public land hunter when it comes to really turkey and deer both for the most part right now. I did gain permission to turkey hunt a property here close to where I live through my wife. She was able to hook me up with a spot, but and I know there's turkeys there. The guy will send me pictures of turkeys out in his yard, but I have yet to hear a bird gobble or see a bird on that property the handful of times I've been out there. But so I don't know. I don't know if they're just using that as an evening spot or what it is, but I just have not been able to get on any birds on that place. But
I guess this kind of ties into the spring thing as well. I think you're the only guy I've ever seen in the South who actively shed hunts public land. I guess anywhere here in the South. I've seen guys. I saw Lindsay last year picked up quite a few sheds on his property because they had burned. But you actually go out shed hunting every spring, don't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love to shed hunt. More than anything, it's just a chance to get out at that time of year. Deer season's ended. Typically turkey season hadn't came in yet, so you start getting cabin fever, and it's just a great opportunity to get out, get some exercise. And of course, I use it for scouting too, both deer and turkey. I'm looking for those antlers, but at the same time, I'm paying attention to those deer trails and thick areas. I'm getting out there in areas that I didn't want to disturb during the season. So it's just a great opportunity to postseason scout as well, or even on public land. What's great is when you're dealing with large tracts is it gives you a chance to look at some areas that maybe you haven't explored in the past. So, yeah, I do enjoy getting out that time of year and looking for sheds. And I've had a good bit of luck in the past shed hunting on public land.
Brian, how did your shed season go? What did you find?
I found let's see, just a handful. Again, didn't get out near as much this past season as I have in the past, and as much as I wanted to, but nothing. I'm trying to think. I found one decent half of an 8-pointer on a wildlife management area, not too far from the house here. But other than that, it was a lot of basket rack 6s and 8s, and didn't find a full set this year, a matched pair, but just like I said, a handful. That was the one thing that was certainly nice about working on public lands was, man, it really gave you opportunity. Not necessarily out there shed hunting per se, but when you're out there every day, you come across sheds just undoubtedly, and especially during burning season, man, there's no better way to find sheds than with controlled burn. Go in there after a good controlled burn, and those things stick out like a sore thumb. And that's actually how I found a couple of them this year, getting in there after, shortly after a controlled burn, and just walking and glassing those burn areas. And like I said, they really stand out with the sun shining on them, with all that black background.
Now, on these pieces of property that you're shed hunting, do you see any kind of pattern or anything to where you typically find these sheds? I know you're talking about in a post-burn area, but geographically, do you see any patterns? Because I know on my farm in Mississippi, we very rarely find sheds. Occasionally we'll find them in the green fields. I actually did find a really nice mat shed this year, about a 145-inch mat shed. But historically, hardly ever find them. I'm pretty sure all the bucks on my place just drop them and gather them up and then bury them in some hole somewhere off in the woods somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always found a good bit in those green areas, those food plots that for the wildlife management areas that have those, which we have a good bit around here that they'll plant wheat in them for a dove field, that kind of thing. And not necessarily deer food plots, but just green areas. And I don't know if it's because they drop them more there, or just because that's the easy places to cover. I like to hit those openings first. Make a few passes to them, use my binoculars as much as I can to help me cover more ground. And then, from there, I typically head to the thicker areas. The thickets where I would think a mature buck would be more likely to hang out and just bust through those briars and get in those thick areas that, like I said, I didn't want to disturb during deer season, but, that's where I've had the most luck, openings and thickets.
We're already getting off in the weeds here, but that's actually perfect for a podcast. So when you're shed hunting, do you think that the areas you're walking through in the spring are those areas that they're using in the fall as well? I know up north, a lot of times they'll use different areas depending on the time of year, but I think a lot of that might have to do with the cover dropping, which, happens some in the south too. Do you feel like if you find a shed in an area in the spring, like there's a good chance that buck's going to be in that same area in the fall?
Well, he's going to be in the same general area, I guess you'd say. Not necessarily, he might not be using that same area on a daily basis, but if that shed's there, that's probably in his home range, and very, very well maybe in his core area. And what research has shown is that, some of these bucks have a pretty small core area, which is where they spend, at least 50% of their time. And they can certainly shift around within their home range seasonally. But, if I find a shed there, I feel like, that buck is somewhere in his home range, most likely. So, if it's one that I want to pursue, I'm going to be getting in there and hanging trail cameras all around that area and seeing if I can't, pinpoint him during the closer to season.
So a question I've been kind of struggling with over the last couple years, and I've recently been talking to a couple guys in the Hunting in the South group on Facebook that we do. Do you think, and I think this kind of ties into shed hunting because of a lot of times you're talking about thickets and some of the bedding areas. Do you think you can pinpoint specific bedding areas for specific deer here in the South, or do you kind of think, or even specific beds in a lot of your area in Georgia, or do you kind of feel like it might be more of a general area than a specific spot?
Well, all I can do is speculate on that. Honestly, I haven't seen any research that points one way or the other, but I mean, I'm inclined to believe it's more of a general area. There's a lot of cover here in the South, and in most properties that I've seen. It's just it's not like out, in the Midwest where it's a lot of open fields and the only timber's along the creek drainages, and there's only so many places the deer can kind of be. But a lot of the areas here in the South, as you well know, is just cover for miles. And no, I don't think they necessarily bed in the same exact spot every day. They're browsers. They're getting up and moving around and feeding on different things throughout the day and over the course of weeks and months. And I think they kind of bed in maybe in a general area on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, I don't know about the whole buck bed, doe bed, that kind of thing, where they're using the same bed time after time.
I've got just a quick comment on that. I tend to agree with you. I know bucks move around. They probably bed in the same general area, maybe not exactly, but I definitely have found locations over the years on properties that I hunt where you can tell that deer have been bedding in this one spot year after year after year after year. And just based off of the sign around it, there's plenty of rubs and scrapes within the vicinity. These are usually in like isolated, like hard to get locations. I mean, at least I like to think that it's a mature buck bedding in the spot. And it's just kind of interesting when you kind of analyze these locations. If you think about it, if you were a buck, like this is where I would bed. And it's pretty cool to think that, mature bucks year after year, even different mature bucks may be bedding in that same spot, like over, who knows how long.
Kyle, is that a more flat area, or is that is there more some elevation there?
No, typically where my farm is, it's a lot of elevation. But a lot of the areas that I've found over the years that I'm speaking about, we've got some really major creek systems that run through the farms and the leases I hunt in Mississippi. That's in like the hill country part of Mississippi, the bluff country. And, I mean, these places will drop off like 40, 50 feet. Like they're like ravine, like cliff edges almost. I mean, the erosion just over time. So over the years, I found a lot of beds scattered along the edges of these creeks, even though it may be a flat area per se, like a oak flat or something before it drops off to the creek. But I found a lot of deer will bed along the edges of these creeks with their back to the creek and look out over these flat areas, even if they're wide open. They can see 200 or 300 yards. Obviously not a good stand of timber, but because they're protected from behind, or they're protected from the creek side. But I found some areas like some islands, like where the creeks will split and go around little sections of land, and it's pretty much like a fortress, if you can think about it. Like there's no way to access it where whatever is in this location cannot see like the approach, like a tactical type of standpoint. So it's kind of cool to get in the deer's head in those instances.
Yeah, Brian, I'm curious, do you see a different, I imagine with you working for the Department of Wildlife in Georgia and Kentucky, you kind of see a vast array of different areas. Do you see, I guess I'm trying to think of like, I'm sure a lot of the land in Georgia is, planted row pines basically. Do you see deer tend to bed more in the pines or down in the bottoms and that kind of stuff where the hardwoods are at?
I mean, I guess my limited experience down here, I've been down here in Georgia, I guess about 6 years now. And it's been a tough thing to figure out, to be honest with you. I was not used to hunting planted pines back in Kentucky. But I've witnessed both. I've definitely, witnessed them bedded down, and especially in young pine stands, thick pine stands, use that for bedding. But I've seen similar activity or bedding activity as what I've seen in Kentucky too, as well, where they might use a ridge point and bed down where kind of like Kyle was saying, where they have a good vantage point and can see danger coming from down below them. Use the wind coming from behind and just be able to have a pretty good 360-degree view or protection zone of protection to keep them safe. So, like I said, I've seen it both ways, but I certainly am not an expert into in southern whitetails at this point.
Well,
I don't think anybody is.
Yeah, we're all kind of grasping for straws here, so trying to figure it out the best we can.
Maybe Mr. Warren. That's it.
Yeah. So I got one more question before we're going to get into some summer scouting here, but I'm always interested, somebody that studied wildlife in college, did you have like a final project that you had to work on? I'm always interested in these research projects that students do. Did you have a final project that you worked on?
Yeah, I didn't get my master's degree. I didn't have a thesis per se, but yeah, we did have a big project in my main wildlife course, to where basically we just had to write a 50-year management plan for a section of public land there in Kentucky, down to annual budgets and timber management plan and the whole 9 yards. So,
Brian, we talked about shed hunting. We talked about going around the woods, spring turkey season. I'm kind of interested to know what you do in the summertime, or if you do anything for scouting on both public lands and maybe if you have access to any private lands or lease. Like, how do you treat those areas in the summertime to prepare you for the upcoming season? And is there any difference in how you treat those areas?
Yeah, I don't know how much good it does, but I still like to get out over the course of the summer and walk, especially on public land. I try to use that opportunity to check out some areas that I maybe haven't hunted in the past, just kind of expand my knowledge of an area and learn some other tracks. And then, of course, I love running trail cameras. So as soon as they start growing antler, in late spring, early summer, I like to get trail cameras out, and I do run trail cameras on public land, and knock on wood, I haven't lost any to this point, but I do take a little extra precaution when putting them out. I'm running some here at my house. I'm in the process of buying the home that I'm in that I've been renting, along with 12 acres, and there are some deer on it, and I've had some decent bucks on camera in the past, and haven't seen them yet this summer, but I definitely watch that closely. I planted a small food plot with some iron clay cowpeas, and just mainly try to get everything ready, get my stands ready. I try to get those hung well before the season, which most of that I try to pick out my stand locations and that kind of stuff post season from the previous season. I get out there and look around and scout the areas that I'd hunted and seen if there was a better location I needed to be in than the one I was using, and go ahead and mark trees at that point and kind of figure out where I want to be. And then the summer stuff just kind of helps me hone in on, hone in that plan and see if that's still where I want to be, or am I getting pictures somewhere else, or have they changed up their movement patterns, and just use that information to put a plan together and hang some stands, and then just sit back and wait. And of course, I try to shoot my bow all year long, and have definitely been doing that this year.
Yeah, I noticed you've been shooting a lot of 3D tournaments, right?
Yeah, I have. it's something. Yeah, I've been a bow hunter since I started hunting. I mean, I started deer hunting with a bow before I ever picked up a rifle, but and I've shot some 3D over the years and always enjoyed it. But for whatever reason, I just never really got into it competitively. And my daughter started shooting 4-H archery this past fall, and I started helping out with that, helping coach. And next thing you know, we were going to some indoor shoots locally. And then when 3D rolled out, in the late winter, early spring, we started hitting some 3D shoots. And yeah, I've gone overboard, I guess. Like I needed another hobby, but I've really enjoyed it, and it's a great way for me and my daughter, my teenage daughter, to get to spend some time together. So it's been a good thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I keep telling myself I'm going to start going to and getting into the competitive side. I really enjoy shooting, and I compete friendly with friends of mine, for a little pocket cash on occasion, but nothing nothing official. But just real quick, this is kind of off topic, but I'm curious with how you train and the process that you go through in a 3D shoot, like a competitive shoot. Like, how do you think that prepares you for the upcoming deer season? I mean, I'm sure it improves your focus.
Yeah. I mean, I think most importantly, it's just the fact that it keeps me out there shooting. Shooting a lot, practicing, and so yeah, it does help you focus. It helps you get better at aiming small, and working on any kinks in your form, any equipment problems that might be going on. In past years, I was one of those guys that wait till 2 or 3 weeks before season and get my bow out and sling arrows for a few nights, and everything's still good, and I'm ready to go. But you just, when you do that, you just don't have time to really perfect your form. You don't have time to really get an idea of if your equipment is finely tuned. When that deer walks in, especially a mature buck, you want the shot to be second nature. You don't want to have to be thinking about all the different aspects of the shot. There's enough adrenaline rushing as it is. You just want to be able to pull it off without, like I said, without a hitch, just second nature. And I think that's the most important thing it does. It's certainly, I've been asked if shooting in a high pressure tournament is the equivalent of shooting at a deer, and it's definitely not. There's just no comparison to that adrenaline rush you get, when a deer's down there below that, you're gonna put an arrow in. But there are some similarities there. There's certainly, you do get that increasing heart rate and that rush of adrenaline, even, in a tournament situation, that nervousness. But, it's definitely not the same, but I do think it helps at that moment of truth. When you've practiced and practiced and practiced until it's just second nature.
It does seem like in a hunting situation, there's so many more variables for, as far as the deer seeing you, or you gotta release it right when they step in the right point, or stop, but I can also see just the training involved with that be a huge help.
Yeah, I think so. I know in the years past, the years that I did spend more time shooting 3D, even though I wasn't, in it competitively really, but the times where I was shooting my bow all year and getting out with my friends and shooting some 3D, I always went into the season more confident, in my ability to make that shot at the moment of truth. So, and I think confidence is everything when it comes to shooting a deer.
How did you get plugged into that? Was that some buddies that were doing it, or did you look it up online? If somebody wants to start doing 3D stuff, they probably could still get going a little bit before season now. How'd you find that out?
Yeah, there's I mean, each state's a little different, but there was a website here for Georgia that a lot of the local clubs, there's clubs all across the state, and I'm sure every state's the same way. There's clubs across every state out there, archery clubs, and they're having these 3D shoots, so it's just a matter of tracking them down, Googling, whatever your state is, 3D archery shoots, and you can probably find a resource out there to find where these shoots are. Or in some cases, maybe your state might have a state archery organization, and that's a great source as well. But yeah, I just started doing a little digging and finding some. I don't have any, unfortunately, right here by the house, but there's several within an hour or hour and a half drive as far as 3D shoots. Now there are some local places to shoot indoors, but yeah, just did a little digging online and started getting out and hitting them, about every weekend.
Did you know some guys that were already doing it, or you just kind of show up and see what's going on?
No, at the time, I mean, when I first got into it, I just started showing up myself and shooting, and you usually end up shooting with a group of guys, and yeah, it can be a little bit intimidating coming into it, especially if you're just a bow hunter, just wanting to get out and get some extra practice. The thought of it can be a little intimidating, but I promise you, if you get out there and do it, it's not. Yeah, there are some guys that take it seriously and have the fancy target bows and all the equipment that goes with it. But there's a lot of guys out there that are just bringing the bow they hunt with, and they just want to have a good time and shoot and get some practice in. And I've yet to run into anyone shooting 3D archery that I didn't, hit it off with and get along with. It's just a good group of guys for the most part. And yeah. I would definitely encourage anyone that likes to bow hunt, man, get out there and shoot some 3D. You'll enjoy it.
It sounds like a lot of fun. So you mentioned trail cameras earlier. You got the 12 acres you're on. I know you might have some other private you're on. Maybe before we get into all these different topics, how about this next deer season? Can you kind of go over the different types of properties that you're going to be hunting? Just so we have some context.
Yeah. Well, I'll be my my private land is probably going to be limited to the 12 acres here. Well, I say 12 acres. It's 12 acres that I'm looking to buy, but the people that I'm buying it from actually own about 70 altogether. But it's just a lot of it's open. It's got cattle and goats and dogs running all over the place, and not the greatest place to deer hunt, but the 12 acres I'm on does have a lot of potential. Once I can get it in my name and start controlling a little more of the traffic on it, and
high fencing.
Yeah, no, I don't have to do that, but man, just the people who are selling it to us, great people, but they're retired and it's a hobby farm, and he's all over it all the time. And so just being able to control a little bit more of that, set an area aside where, there's not a lot of traffic, get a little more into the food plot side of it. Some of the woods on it need to be thickened up and some work done there, but it definitely has potential. But I'll be hunting on it some. But aside from that, it'll probably be public land, and unless I can get the guy that's letting me turkey hunt now, I think it's about 140 acres. That's actually my wife's boss. If I can talk him into letting me bow hunt, then maybe I'll get out there and hunt that some too. That place definitely has some potential, and seen a lot of deer sign and a good number of deer out there when I was turkey hunting. So, but it'll be a lot of time on public lands. I have about 1,200 acres of 1,200 acre wildlife management area that's literally 3 miles down the road here. That's archery only. So I hit it a good bit, and then there's probably another 10,000 or so within 30, 40 minutes of me, 10,000 acres.
Oh, that's nice. I wish I had some public land that close. Right now where I'm at, there's public land within probably an hour and a half of where I live, but it's quota hunts. So you only get drawn for it certain times, and usually those are tough to get since I'm in Tampa Bay. Of course, everybody that lives in Tampa Bay here, those are the hunts they want to get, and not necessarily the greatest habitat anyway. So, that sounds really nice to be able to do that. You also had hunted some leases in the past. Is that how did you end up doing that and not doing that? How did that whole line of events happen?
Well, And yeah, I wouldn't mind. I definitely consider a lease again in the future. I don't mind hunting public land at all. I enjoy it. But it is difficult with my kids and my wife, which I like to get them out as much as I can. And just like you said, a lot of especially the rifle hunting, a lot of that's limited to quota hunts or very limited sign-in hunts. So you just can't get them out as much as I would like to. So yeah, I'm definitely open to another lease, but I got in a lease just a year or two after coming here to Georgia. A guy I'd made friends with had a lease here not too far from where I'm living. And he got me in on it. It was pretty inexpensive as far as leases go, really inexpensive as far as leases go. But I quickly found out that, man, there was just no rules in place. It was the Wild West for the most part. We had guys. It was really too many hunters, in my opinion, for the acreage we had to start with. But a lot of those guys wasn't hunting a lot, but the ones that were killing every deer that came by. Two guys, and I think we had 12 or 13 guys on less than 700 acres, and two guys killed 14 deer between the two of them.
Yeah.
And you can't sustain that. And I was on it for a few years. I tried to. The guy that got me in was the one in charge of it, and man, I just did everything but begged him to put some rules in place on these guys, and they were his buddies from work, and he just wouldn't do it. And so I eventually got out of that lease. And ironically, I guess 2 years after I got out of the lease, the DNR now took over the lease of that property, so it's now public land. So I get to hunt it now as a wildlife management area.
That's actually a perfect transition, because when you're saying that, I wanted to ask you about, do you think a lot of these hunting leases actually are more pressured than the hunting property? If there's a decent amount of land around, basically you're not confined to 1,400 acres or something like that.
Yeah. Do I think that some of the leases are more hunted than public land? Is that what?
Yeah, even the deer are more pressured, period. Yeah,
I think in some cases, certainly. And of course, in this case, it went from, a rifle lease where there was a lot of rifle pressure on it to an archery only area. It's actually a part of a Boy Scout camp. So just for safety reasons, they made it an archery only area. So that, that certainly lightens the pressure on it. And honestly, I guess it's been open now for two seasons. And yeah, I mean, I've seen a few guys out there, but haven't had any issues with walking up on another hunter or another hunter walking up on me. And fortunately, I guess just from being on the lease out there, I kind of have a good idea of what areas to hunt. And there's plenty of deer. I've seen deer out there most hunts, and was able to kill a couple deer off of it this past season. And it's worked out well. I'm glad it's a public track now, honestly.
So I did some quick math there. If you had 700 acres and 14 guys or 13 guys, you're about, 50 acres a person. Is there a number you think is a good number for that as far as a lease? I know it's going to depend on how often the guys hunt and that kind of stuff. But if you were to join another lease, what kind of acreage would you look for per person?
Personally, I mean, I don't know that there's a magic number, and like you said, it definitely, there's a lot of variables there. But I would really look towards a property that maybe 100 acres per person. Of course, that's going to make it a more expensive lease for each person, but certainly improve the quality of the hunt. But like you said, another thing I look at is, where do these people live? How serious of hunters are they? Because, again, there was 13 or so guys on this property, but they all lived a good ways away, and some of them had other leases. So really, I rarely ran into them. It wasn't really a crowding issue, but they had other leases where they were more carefully managed and were after a mature buck, and then they would come to this place to just shoot everything they seen. It was just kind of just a place where they could fill their freezer. So that's what made it so difficult. Really, the numbers, because of where they lived and how often they hunted, it wasn't so much an issue of the number of guys as it was just that they wouldn't put any bag limits in place or any restrictions as far as that goes.
So, looking back on it, is there something you can look back and be like, oh man, I should have seen this coming, or I should have asked this, or is there a way somebody could avoid that happening?
Yeah, just do your research on the front end, which I didn't do. It was just an opportunity to get in on my first lease here in Georgia when I had been strictly hunting public land. And it, like I said, it was inexpensive as far as leases go. And so, I mean, there's no hard feelings. I don't regret, the 2 or 3 years that I was on the lease at all. I killed some deer out there, and my son
scouting time. For
got
public land. So.
That's right. Got to scout it out good. And my son was able to kill a couple deer out there. He killed his first buck while hunting by himself, or his first deer period while hunting by himself out there. So that, that was certainly a special memory for me. So I don't have any regrets, but yeah, just do your homework on the front end. Ask those questions. How many people are on this lease for, how many acres? If you can get some background on the people, where they live, or find a little bit of information as far as how hard these guys are actually hunting, what kind of harvest restrictions do you have in place, whether it's, restrictions on the size of the buck or how many deer total you can kill, just know all that up front. So there's no issues later down the road once you've handed over your money.
That's perfect. I didn't even have to ask you all those questions. I know you wrote an article on that. I'm not sure if it was in Quality Whitetails or just I think it might have just been on QDMA.com, but basically on, what to look for in a lease and that kind of stuff. So, I guess my last question about the leases though is, you mentioned you'd consider getting in one again. So you have a ton of public to hunt. You got a little piece of private. What is it about a lease that you find attractive that you might want to do that? Assuming, you got the money and that kind of stuff.
Well, it would mainly, the key thing would have to be, it would have to be like a family friendly type lease, because I'm mainly looking for a place where I could get my kids out or my wife out, and they would have a decent chance of shooting a deer. Or maybe, or part of it would also be, maybe a place that would provide a better chance at a quality buck or a mature buck. So I'd definitely be more choosy going in to another lease at this point. Maybe be willing to drive a little further, find one a little further away in exchange for more quality hunting experience.
So obviously everybody's got their own, they got to evaluate their own situation. But it sounds like for you might still hunt the public land quite a bit and trade that for maybe less hunting time, but maybe better deer. You basically, by joining the lease, you have an opportunity at better deer.
Yeah. If you can find a lease that, like I said, has some quality standards, maybe an age or antler restriction, find one that's actually able to put out some food plots and do some habitat work, and just get in with a good group of guys, something maybe more long term. I would definitely be willing, but certainly not. That's why I'm not in one now. It's not a rush. I enjoy, like I said, I enjoy hunting public land. I got it here close by the house. It would just be more of an opportunity to get the family out there. And I took a step towards that last year. Actually went out and bought a crossbow, an evil crossbow, so I could get my kids, because the area here by my house is archery only, as well as that, like I said, that former lease that I was on, it's an archery only area now. So bought a crossbow and can get them out more this coming season.
Brian, you were talking a little bit about like what you do on public, but also that you might be interested in getting back on a lease if you found something that was kind of habitat minded, or where you could do some food plots or some other work. I'm just curious about your hunting style. Like, if you had to choose, would you rather hunt public land, kind of a run and gun deal where you had to scout and had to, deal with the competition, or would you rather hunt in a situation where you can do some habitat work, maybe hang some stands beforehand, like have some food plots? Those are two kind of different styles of hunting, and I'm just curious of, where your mindset is.
Well, I mean, it definitely appeals to me to have a place where I could do some habitat work and stuff. Obviously, with my background in that, it's something I enjoy. I've always enjoyed, and that's really one of the main reasons that I'm buying this 12 acres. I'm really excited, even though it's a small property. It's still going to allow me to do some work on something that's mine. And while obviously we'll have to limit the hunting pressure and the harvest on just 12 acres, which again is why I would, certainly entertain the thought of another lease. But yeah, I mean, both appeal to me. I enjoy hunting public land. It's certainly a challenge. It's also just, typically, or at least around here, it's larger tracts of land. So it's just kind of a freedom of having that room to run. You're not, limited to a small acreage or a small place where, if something comes in and messes it up, then you're done. You just have a lot more opportunity on a bigger tract of public land like that. I just haven't experienced a whole lot of crowding or pressure really as far as archery hunting here in Georgia. So I've had good experiences, but again, I certainly like the thought of being able to do some management work on a private tract as well. So I enjoy both.
Yeah, I understand. I'm kind of in the same seat as you. Obviously, how involved I am with QDMA and where my real passions with managing habitat, managing wildlife. And I'm actually fairly new to the public land whitetail hunting and like the DIY sort of style. But just in the past recent years, most of that's been through trips. And there's also a lot of draw. It's a completely different skill set to that sort of DIY, kind of like hunting the public land and kamikaze scouting, and there's a lot of draw there too. So I'm kind of switching in that direction a little bit, but I definitely find both of them, satisfying.
Yeah, and trips, and I'm absolutely chomping at the bit to get out and try some Midwest whitetail hunting. I took my son out to Nebraska to turkey hunt. I guess not this past spring, but the spring before. And man, I've been in Nebraska before, just visiting, and one other time turkey hunting. But man, that definitely, that Midwest hunting appeals to me. It just I haven't done it, so I can't sit here and say it's easier than hunting in the South, but it definitely seems like it would be easier to pinpoint travel and bedding areas and to set up an ambush and kill some deer. And I want to find out. So hopefully I'll make a trip here in the near future and experience it myself.
Yeah, being a southern hunter like you are, I have been able to make several trips to the Midwest, and I've hunted both, like highly managed private farms and also public land. And the public land hunting can be really tough. But just being there in the Midwest in November is it's magical. I mean, it's kind of like for a whitetail hunter, at least, especially us who aren't used to it, coming from the South. It's kind of like Christmas, because there's always that chance, that booner might walk out. And there are big deer in the South, definitely, but man, up there, there's a lot more of them.
Behind every tree, right?
Oh yeah, behind every tree. And if you're lucky, they're tied to the tree.
Yeah. What must be hunting in the Midwest, same places you were turkey hunting, huh? Huh, Kyle?
Yeah, definitely.
Uh, Brian, I gotta totally agree with you on the lease aspect. One of the reasons you mentioned was family, and I'm kind of deal with the same thing myself. I got a bunch of young kids, and I want to get them out in the woods, but one of my challenges is it's just really tough to do on public land. So I can really see the benefit of having food plots and box blinds and preset stands and all that stuff. As much as I love getting out in the woods, scouting and basically hang and hunt type situations, it just doesn't work real good with a 7-year-old, So I think your kids are a little bit older, but I can definitely see that as a major reason somebody would want to consider a lease as well as public land if you got little kids.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like you said, when they're that age, man, you almost got to put them in a blind of some type, unless your kids are just a lot more disciplined than mine were, because
nope.
they were
yeah.
they were packing Game Boys and coloring books and everything else to keep their interest. And we did. Fortunately, in Kentucky, I did have access to some decent private land, and just had a little more opportunity to get them out when they were young, and get them some deer and get them, just some good hunting experiences. But and we've had some good ones here in Georgia as well on public land. I mean, Georgia does a great job of setting these hunts up. They have some youth only hunts where you can get out and have a pretty good hunting experience. And both my kids have had success on some of the quota hunts, but it's just so limited. It's 2 days here and 2 days the next month. You just can't get them out there when you want to all the time. So that's where having that access to good private land is definitely a bonus.
So I think that probably transitions to where I want to talk about next is this little piece of private you've got. So you've got all this public you can get on, but obviously there's some things specifically that you're excited about having a little piece of your own to manage. So what's your motivation for wanting to get in your own little piece of land?
It's just one of those things where, I went to college to get a wildlife management degree and spent over 10 years working on wildlife management areas, managing those for a better hunting experience for the users. And just always dreamed of having a piece of property where I could do that for myself, put that knowledge and experience to work for myself. And so it's definitely, it's very appealing to me. Obviously I wish it was more than 12 acres, but the good thing about a small property is you can, easily manage every acre of that, and maximize every square foot, for whitetail deer. And that's what I'm going to try to do as much as possible.
What's your plan with hunting that? Like, how many times do you think you'll hunt it this season, and how will you hunt it? I know I'm not going to know exactly, but I'm sure you have some type of idea what you'll do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously 12 acres, and especially when I haven't got to do that much to it at this point, other than a small food plot. But I'm really, the trail cameras are going to dictate when and how much I hunt it. I'm really waiting to see. I had 3 bucks that were all 3.5 plus, years old last year, showing up routinely on camera. Up until season started, of course, but
right.
I haven't seen them yet this year. It's just been does and a couple of small 1.5-year-old bucks. So I'm really just waiting to see whether any of those mature bucks show back up, and if they do, on a small property, you may only get one chance. A property that small, you may only get one shot at one of those mature bucks. So same thing I did last year. It'll be the same plan, only it just didn't work out. I had them last year coming in. Initially it was middle of the night, and then slowly got closer and closer to the point to where I finally had one of them showing up just right at the end of legal shooting light. So I finally went in and hunted it, and I don't know if it was him, but a deer came up right at dark, over across the fence on the neighbor's property. I just seen him make his way up all I could make out at that point, it was so dark, was just an outline of a body. He worked his way up and went out, and a little while later, I crawled down and climbed down and got out of there. And I don't know if he seen me. I don't know if he smelled me or what, but that was the end of them showing up, close to legal shooting light. After that, it was back to middle of the night. So, you got to make the hunt count. And so I'll definitely be watching those trail cameras and waiting for an opportunity where they're showing up in legal shooting light, and just try to be proactive and get in there and hunt it, with just the right wind and conditions. And now, if those bucks don't show up and I'm just getting does and a small buck or two, then I'll probably just try to get one of my kids out there and, again, watch the trail cameras, see when they're coming in, when the conditions are right, and get one of them out there and let them fill a tag.
Well, I think you might have kind of already answered this with talking about your kids filling the tag, but you always kind of wonder with small properties like that, especially when you live on it. So let's say you got a set of like, a small doe group of 3 or 4 does that you see regularly, feeding in the yard and that kind of stuff. How do you feel about shooting one of those does? I guess for some reason I feel like it's different with a buck. But is that something you feel like you'd be fine doing? As if, you see the deer all year, and let's say you got an empty freezer at the end of the season, you going to take one of those does?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I wouldn't have any problem doing that. It's not like they're coming up and feeding in the yard. But yeah, that's a possibility in the future as we manage the property a little more intensely. I don't know. I'd have to cross that bridge when I came to it. But right now, it's these deer are coming up kind of in the far corner of the property from our house. They're definitely not, brazen to the point where they're just standing out in the open.
Yard
and
deer, your pets.
No, they're wild deer. They're just coming up and feeding out of that food plot I've got. And there's a pasture there as well right now that's still got some clover and stuff growing in it that they'll come up. We'll see them at night a lot, pulling in the driveway. Your headlights go across the pasture there, and they'll be out there, feeding on that clover and stuff in the pasture. But I wouldn't hesitate to shoot one at this point, or let my kids shoot one. But yeah, if it gets to the point where they're coming up in the yard and feeding, that might be a different story.
Do you have any experience with trying to knock on doors and gain permission here in either Kentucky or in Georgia? Have you done much of that at all?
I haven't done a whole lot of that here in Georgia. Did a lot of that during my college years there in Kentucky. And fortunately, that was a time when, you would actually get some yeses. Really didn't have a whole lot of trouble back then knocking on some doors there in Western Kentucky and gaining access to a few decent hunting spots. And, typically the ones that did turn you down, it was because, they were hunting it themselves or they had family hunting it. It wasn't because they had an issue with hunting or a bad attitude. It was just a matter of, it was a spot that was already taken. But since then, really, most of my access I've gained while in Kentucky and the turkey spot here in Georgia, it's more about really networking, just connections and kind of getting the word out that you need a place to hunt and talking with people that you might work with or go to church with or just know. You'd be surprised how many people that maybe they don't own land, but hey, yeah, my uncle's got a farm, and I don't know if anybody hunts it, and that's worked for me over the years, more so in Kentucky than here in Georgia so far. But fortunately for me, my wife has never met a stranger, so she takes up with anybody, and it takes her all of about 5 minutes to become best friends with somebody, and she's actually been able to get me some places to hunt over the years just through that. People she runs into and starts talking about me being a hunter, and the next thing you know, she's got me permission to hunt some piece of private land.
That is awesome.
So
that is really cool.
It's good to have a talking about going wife.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and who's willing to try to get you hunting permission.
Yeah.
Yes. What about your position with the QDMA? Does that help at all? Because that, it doesn't sound like right now you got anything lined up with that. Do opportunities come up with that just through you being in the, deer hunting industry?
Well, if they have, I'm still waiting on the word. But
Yeah.
no, other than no, I will say Lindsay has taken me a few times to his place down in South Georgia.
Grace Acres, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, I haven't been to Grace Acres, but
that's a premium one. He takes you to the other one.
Yeah, I get the backup, but no,
that's all right.
He's got another property that their family just manages for somebody, and he's taking me there, and I got to shoot a couple deer, a couple does there a year or two ago, and been there turkey hunting as well. So, but yeah, other than that, no, it's not like you just get phone calls and emails to come hunt private property, but maybe
these guys are like managing their property, for basically their family and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, the way that works is it's you got to kind of limit what's going on there so you can control it. So I completely understand that just being part of an organization like that does not equal unlimited hunting opportunity.
Yeah.
Kyle, you can probably speak to that, huh?
Yeah, well, mostly I just get phone calls to come look at other people's properties because they want some free advice, which I'm happy to do. I like getting out in the outdoors any chance I can get, but I haven't gotten any hunting advice yet. Maybe this year. I'll keep my fingers crossed.
But you're on the flip side of that too. You're not. I know you had brought some new hunters out a couple times, but it's obviously not. You can't just open up your property to anybody that wants to come out either.
Right. When you, like you said, when you've got a piece of property you're trying to manage, we're trying to control pressure, and I like to bring hunters out. I like to bring new hunters. I bring friends and family all the time, but all in all, we can't just open it free reign. Like, I still try to control that pressure as much as I can, but definitely, I definitely open it up to new hunters every chance I get. I'm doing what I can to promote hunting heritage and spread that passion. In today's day and age, with our declining hunters, we got to do what we can to light that spark in other people.
And that kind of speaks to something else I've been wanting to ask you about, Brian. I know you guys QDMA just got granted, I think, a decent piece of property. And I know it's something you guys are going to be doing habitat improvements and on that kind of stuff. And I was actually wondering if that's something that some of the staff might be able to hunt on, or if you're just trying to reserve that for, outreach type events. What's the function of that?
Yeah, we got, and man, you put me on the spot here. It was a little over 100 acres. I don't remember the exact amount, but donated to us. That just happened to be, right there adjacent to our current 25 acres. And it will be just an opportunity or an outreach for some of our hunting programs, our field to fork, or maybe some youth hunting opportunities, as well as, just a teaching tool for, we'll be doing quite a bit of management work on the property. And it'll just be an opportunity to have those, like field days and educational events where we can demonstrate different habitat techniques and land management strategies.
I guess this is an opportunity to talk about this a little bit. If somebody's got some property or they're part of a lease or something like that, I know a lot of times there'll be hunting clubs where they can't get their members to shoot enough does. The wildlife biologist may be saying you need to take this many does, and sometimes these guys just don't want to deal with it. They're out there to, they've got enough meat in the freezer and they're hunting bucks. They're not trying to kill does. If somebody's got some property like that, is there something set up with the QDMA where somebody could call you guys and you can hook them up, maybe with a local branch or something, to basically, nobody wants to open up like anybody come on and hunt or lease, but I think like what Kyle was saying, there might be people that want to provide opportunities for people that are trying to get into the sport.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly opened those types of opportunities. I mean, we have a very aggressive 5-year goal to introduce 1 million new or beginning hunters to the outdoors, and so yeah, anybody that would have property that would be willing to let some new hunters, whether it be youth or even adult new hunters, come out in a organized way and have an opportunity to shoot some deer. Yeah, they could contact the national office, and we could put them in touch with the local branch, or maybe even be able to do something at the national level, depending on what the property's like and how many people it can accommodate. But yeah, we certainly wouldn't turn our nose up to opportunities like that.
So we got one final piece we haven't talked about, and that's the public land. And I know you have been able to get a lot of experience through working for the state and also just yourself hunting it. What are some of the advantages of hunting public land over hunting private or having a lease?
Well, I think one of the big ones is just, like I said earlier, it's typically, and maybe not always, but there are larger tracts of land, so there's more of a freedom there, or room to roam, where you can really get out and scout out these larger blocks and see some different types of habitat. It gives you the opportunity to kind of travel around and hunt, see different areas. You're not hunting the same 12 acres or 100 acres and just seeing the same thing over and over. You can get out, whether it's out of your county or out of your state, and hunt some different areas that you're not used to seeing, different habitat, maybe better quality deer in some cases. It's just it's a great resource. I mean, public land. You get see a lot of people making negative comments or complaining about public lands, and a lot of times it's guys that aren't even hunting public land, or maybe they hunted it and had one bad experience and just wrote it off. Yeah, you're gonna run into other people, and people are gonna run into you, and every once in a while you might run into somebody who's a jerk about it, but for the most part, it's good people just like you and me that are out there just trying to have an opportunity to get in the outdoors and hunt deer or hunt whatever. And it's just a great resource to have access to, and fortunately, Georgia has pretty good public land opportunities, and Kentucky did as well. So I guess that's kind of the main benefits.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you. I've mentioned this before, but I think anybody that's got either, let's say you got 100 acres of private property, or unless you got thousands of acres of your own to hunt on, if you got a lease or anything like that, I just think it should be part of anybody's arsenal to just get on some public land. I think there's so much opportunity to see different habitat and learn a lot, and you don't really have to worry about messing it up. You don't want to be scouting. You don't want to be scouting your private 100 acres, right before the season starts. But public land, there's thousands and thousands of acres, and those deer get pressured from all kinds of people, all different ways. So you don't have to worry about running them onto the neighbor's property or something, because it's not a deer that's using your property anyway. You can try something else. So I would encourage everybody just to try it. And if you had a bad experience, maybe try a different area or something. But I think that I didn't hunt public hardly last year, just a couple times, and I tell you what, I missed it. Now on the flip side, I loved having a lot of private to hunt. There's a lot of advantages in that. But I just think somebody should be trying all of it. So that's why I wanted to talk to you about all the different ones, and I would just encourage you, whichever one you don't have, to try to get access to, because they're all different experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, public land's definitely afforded me opportunities that private land never could. I've got to go out to Wyoming and chase antelope a couple times, and bow hunted mule deer in Wyoming, and like I said, I've turkey hunted out in Nebraska and Kansas a couple times, and it's just it's just a really cool experience to be able to get out there and see those different areas and hunt them. And, without public land, that wouldn't happen. So I definitely don't have, deep enough pockets to be leasing properties in states all across the country. So,
and especially like with areas out west, there's literally millions and millions of acres of public land out west. We're just, average guys like us can go out there and hunt elk or hunt mule deer. A lot of people just don't think about that. They think they need to shell out all this money to go pay for an outfitter to go on some of these crazy hunts. But the fact is there's just hundreds of millions of acres of private land for us to go take advantage of. And as American citizens, we all own that. So it's nice to be able to take advantage of it.
Yep, absolutely.
One other thing I want to add on the public land stuff is I think probably most states in the South have like special opportunity hunts or quota hunts or something like that, where there's, it takes some year, a lot like out west, where it takes some time to build up points and that kind of stuff. I'd encourage everybody to just start putting in for that stuff and build some chances up, because some of those hunts are just really, really good habitat, really good deer genetics, that kind of stuff, where you might not even have that opportunity on your own private land or something. So I know for sure here in Florida, I'd recommend everybody just start putting in and getting points so you can get some of those really good hunts. And let's say you only hunt you only hunt public land once every 3 or 4 years because you're doing just the premium hunts. It's a pretty cool experience to be able to do that. So does Georgia have something similar to that, Brian?
Yeah, they have some pretty good quota hunts that you have to build preference points for, and in some cases it might take 2-3 plus years to get drawn. And in fact, the one that my kids have been most successful on, and it hasn't taken them. In fact, we've got drawn. They've got drawn with no points, no preference points before. But there's a unique area about an hour south of me that at one time it was a high fence operation owned by the guy who started North American Whitetail Magazine and all the game and fish publications. But they took the fence down when it was still in private hands. They took part of the fence down, and then the DNR eventually bought it, and of course took the whole fence down. But it still has all these amazing, like 34 shooting houses on it, and I mean nice shooting houses. And they're all, for the most part, setting over food plots, and they use it for mainly. They have some youth hunts there. They have some other open hunts, or not open hunts, but quota hunts, adult quota hunts there as well. But my kids have been fortunate enough to hunt that a few times, and man, always see deer. I think only one time they've gone and not killed a deer there, and just a really unique opportunity. To hunt on public land here in Georgia. It's been really cool, but there's some other places across the state where you can have a real quality experience and a chance at a 3.5-year-old plus buck in some of these quota hunts.
Kyle, I don't know if they have stuff like that in Louisiana and Mississippi, but I think it'd be a great idea for you to start building up some points and that kind of stuff. Do you know of any stuff like that out there?
In Louisiana and Mississippi, yeah, there are some quota stuff. It's not so much preference points; it's just annual lottery. But I build a lot of points, especially for limited stuff like out west. But as far as in the South, I haven't done that yet.
I think it'd be. I know for you got some great property out in Mississippi, but it'd be pretty cool if you can find a couple places close to the house just to get out a little bit. I guess the challenge is if you don't feel like you have time to do it, then, it's limited time. So if you got great property, it's tough to say, hey, you should hunt this harder area.
Right. And unfortunately where I live, down here right on the coast, we really don't have that many deer. Very few in this area. I live just a few miles from the Gulf of Mexico, basically, but there are some public lands down here that in their marsh property, basically, that have some okay populations of deer, decent amount of deer, and they're all bow hunting only. So I have hunted those a few times. Haven't had any success yet, but that's kind of a fun little deal. If you got to carry 4 thermocells with you and a bucket to sit on, but it's
Yeah.
still a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think with public land, I got to be careful. Especially like with me last year, I really did, like I said, I didn't hunt it much, but I do think there's like people tend to get like a holier than thou attitude if they're hunting public land and they're talking to somebody that's private. I mean, if somebody's got a good piece of private, I can't blame them for spending spending most of their time on there. And if that's where they're able to get their deer from, I think that's great. So, I do want to be careful to not sound like I think anybody that's hunting public is a better hunter or is doing it a better way. I just want to encourage everybody to try to get on some public or try to gain some permission, whatever you're not doing. Just add a different type of hunting to your arsenal.
Absolutely.
Brian, for somebody that hasn't hunted public in the past, what kind of advice could you give them as far as like where should they look? What type of property should they be looking at and before they even go hunting? Like, what are some things you should look at before when you're going to choose which property you're going to hunt on?
Well, I mean, I guess it would depend on, what their expectations were, but, start with your state wildlife agency, see what's around there or whatever state you're planning on hunting. Start with the state wildlife agency. Most of their websites now provide, a listing of public lands available. So that can kind of, if you have an idea of what general area you want to hunt, you can start pinpointing different areas that way. You can certainly, some agencies provide harvest statistics online. Some of them you might have to actually, call and contact the biologist or the technician that's responsible for that area. But a lot of times that's available. So if you're after a mature buck, then you can do a little research and see what areas are killing, more mature bucks than 2.5 and 1.5 year olds. But the main thing is just, man, whatever area you're going to hunt, make sure you read everything you can about that area as far as the rules and regulations, because from working on those areas, that's the biggest thing I see is people just come out there and they don't have a clue about the rules and when the season is or whether or not there's antler restrictions on the area or whether they can harvest a doe or if it's buck only or if they can have an ATV on the open roads or know all those rules before you get there and avoid that uncomfortable run-in with Mr. Green Jeans. That's the biggest thing. But like I said, you can dig a lot deeper if you want to and look at those harvest statistics, see what the success rate is. How long is it taking the average hunter out there to kill a deer, and what's the quality of the deer they're killing there, and there's a lot of information available. If you'll do a little digging, you might have to make some phone calls, but that's kind of the stuff I look at when I'm wanting to try a new piece of public land.
So I guess we'll come full circle here. I think we could do a whole separate episode on some of these questions I'm about to ask you, but I really don't feel like I can let you get off the line with us without sharing a little bit of information on how you hunt. So I guess I just want to ask a few questions about what you're doing on these bigger public pieces, and this would probably apply to a lease as well. But you mentioned trail cameras earlier. Are you putting trail cameras out on public land during the summer like this?
I am, or I have in the past. Actually, I don't have any out right now, but I do plan to get some out here pretty quick on the area here closest to me. But yeah, I do run them on public land. Like I mentioned earlier, I take a little extra level of precaution. Of course, I make sure for one thing that I'm running a Python cable lock on any camera I'm putting out on public land. And another thing I like to do is I'll take a climbing stick with me when I go out to the woods. And when I find a spot where I want to hang a camera, I'll go up that climbing stick and hang the camera, 8-10 feet high and angle it down at, the trail or whatever I'm wanting to focus on. to just get it out of the line of sight. So if, somebody else comes stumbling through there, they're not as likely to see that camera. And, I try to make sure I'm off the beaten path. I'm not hanging cameras on a green field, 100 yards from the parking area. I'm getting off the beaten paths and looking for those thickets and areas where I think deer are most likely to go when the pressure's on. So,
are you hanging cameras on trails, or how are you able to get the most pictures on? I'm assuming you can't use bait on public land.
Right. Yeah. There's no bait. It's strictly early season. It's strictly trails, or if I can find a good creek crossing, something like that, fence crossing where it's obvious they're traveling, then that's where I'll hang it. A little later as the season goes on, and I might hang it on a food source, a persimmon tree that I can tell they're feeding under, or a big white oak or something like that, muscadines. But yeah, a lot of times it's just trails and crossings.
So I know you're probably doing some scouting with that too. What are you typically looking for when you're scouting in the summer now?
Well, I mean, hopefully most of the time I've kind of done my homework by this point with if by hunting it the previous season or postseason scouting, getting out there, right after the season. But I'm looking on public land. I really like to look for thick areas. I like to hunt the fringe of thickets. Again, where I think deer are going to go when the pressure are on. But I'm looking for food sources, which here in the South, a lot of times early season, it is things like muscadines and persimmons, and of course just any this time of year, anything that's green that they might browse on. But sometimes it's hard, depending on the type of area. It might be hard to pin down an exact food source, but I'm looking for thickets. I'm looking for trails, and again, food sources, and any kind of, like I said, if I can find a good crossing somewhere to hang a camera on and see what's in the area, then I'm looking at those as well.
Brian, that's what you're focusing on early season, the bow hunt, or these native food sources?
Yeah, for the most part, the areas around me aren't, they don't have a lot of food plots. Some of them have dove fields, but that's typically where everybody else is looking as well. So I'm looking at places off the beaten path, away from access points as much as possible. Again, I really like looking for those thick, nasty areas where I think deer will hole up, and hunting on the fringe of those, in the right wind and right conditions.
So you mentioned earlier. Sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
No, I'm sorry. So I was just curious how that hunting strategy transitioned from early season, like into the rut. The Georgia rut's in November, right? Like typical November rut.
Where I'm
or
at, yeah.
Not counting like the coastal Georgia and some of those areas, but like where you are, it's a November rut.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So early season, native food sources. So just how does your hunting strategy, how does that change to the rut? And then also I'm curious, like into late season, like post rut, are you going back onto food sources? Or I'm sure during the rut you're hunting, just like most of us, you're hunting travel corridors, pinch points, funnels, creek crossings, stuff like that kind of concentrate that deer movement.
Yep. That's what I'll focus on during the rut. And then, late season, it's back on the food sources, and even, pre-rut, as they're moving off of things like muscadines and persimmons and transitioning to white oak acorns and that kind of stuff, then that's the thing with public land is you constantly, you kind of got to scout as you go and be willing and able to make changes throughout the season, as you see, because so much of your success also depends on the other people around you. And, if somebody else is in the area, blowing deer out of there, then you might have to pull everything down and make a move.
So when you do you said earlier, hopefully you got your stuff figured out by now. Are you doing most of your scouting in the spring, I guess, and when you're doing your shed hunting and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and again, I'm a lot of times, or for the most part, I'm hunting areas that I already know to some extent, or that I've hunted in the past. I do, when I'm out shed hunting and stuff, I look for new areas, and if something really stands out to me, then yeah, I'll make a note of it. And when we get into this time of year, I might get back in there and give it another look, and hang a trail camera and see if it's worth hanging a set in there. But yeah, I already know at this point, or have a pretty good idea at least, where I'm going to hang some stands based on my previous seasons and what I saw while I was hunting. But trail cameras can dictate whether or not that changes.
Are you doing much in-season scouting? Are you looking for rubs or scrapes or any of that stuff, or do you typically just stick with the food sources and the pinch points?
No, I mean, yeah, I try to scout throughout the season and base it. If I'm sitting in a stand and I'm seeing deer, moving from a certain location, heading somewhere that they haven't in the past, or that I wasn't expecting them to, then yeah, I'm going to check that out. And if I need to pull my stand down and make a move, that's what I'm going to do. But yeah, like I said, it's, you got to be willing and able to change things up at any time, because, when you're dealing with public land where other people are hunting and coming in and out, and, things are changing all the time, and you got to be willing to move and change with them. So.
Well, like I said, we could do a whole nother episode on this stuff, and I ask you 100 questions about how you hunt. But I got one last thing I want to find out about for on the public land setups. What's your gear setup? Like, what's your typical stand? How do you move around, that kind of stuff? Are you prepping trees ahead of time, or what's your typical way of hunting?
Well, I like the areas, like I've talked about, that I know from past experience that I want to be in. I'll hang hang-ons in there. I'll go in and hang a muddy stand, and may or may not put some sticks on there. I'll always take the bottom 2 sticks with me and have a stand, of course, locked to the tree, and maybe a couple sticks at the top. And then, I have a summit climber that allows me to move around and mix things up if I need to try, if I just want to try a new location, just to see, if deer are moving in that area, using that area, then I'll use my climber to get in there for that. That's one thing about hunting here in Georgia, is you don't run into too many issues finding a tree you can get a climber in around here. So.
Yeah, that's a little different about being in the South here, is you got a lot of straight, tall pine trees.
Yeah. But I do like that, if it's an area I know I'm going to want to be in, then I love to go ahead and hang a hang-on in there. It's just so much easier to slip in, especially when you're, if you're hunting half mile to a mile from an access point, you can slip in there, not make a terrible lot of noise getting in and out of your tree. I prefer that to using the climber, but the climber definitely keeps you mobile, where you can, try out new areas or switch things up if you need to.
I know that we could definitely talk about hunting tactics and public land versus private land and all this all night. But, before we start to wrap this up, QDMA convention is next week, or I guess I'm not sure when this podcast is going to air, Mike, but
hopefully it's July. Going tonight. Yeah. So we're okay. Yeah, we can talk current events.
Okay. Next week, QDMA convention. I will be there. Mike, I think you will be there, correct?
I'm definitely coming. I got plane tickets. I'll be there Thursday, Friday, and then I'm leaving Saturday night.
Great. Hopefully the Adam Cruz will show up as well. But Brian, you got to tell us a little about this convention coming up for those who don't know what's going on yet.
Actually, can somebody still even show up I know with the registration might be up. Is it still possible to go?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can still online registration is closed, but you can still show up and register on site, and we'd be glad for anybody who's a serious deer hunter or deer manager. We'd love to have them there. It's going to be a great time. This is our 30th anniversary, QDMA's 30th anniversary. So we're just going to have a blowout down in New Orleans and have a ton of really good educational seminars lined up, some great nightly events, banquet type events with some special guests. We'll have Pat and Nicole Reeve of Driven TV and Cuz Strickland of Mossy Oak and the Lindsays, Jeff and David Lindsay of the Lindsay Way. Just a lot of great folks going to be there. We're partnered with the Louisiana Sportsman Show, so you can take advantage of that as well. And it's going to be a great time.
Yeah, I if you're in the area, I encourage anybody to go. We're going to try to get together sometime during then. I'm going to talk to Adam right when we get done, and that might be in the intro since we're going to record that after this. So hopefully you'll have already heard if we're going to be able to get together for some kind of plans. But I'm definitely down for hanging out. If anybody that's coming, just get in touch with me on social media or whatever. The last thing I wanted to touch on is your Sports Afield website, or is it Georgia Afield website? Tell us about what that is, and then what's the best way to get a hold of you if somebody's got any questions or wants to talk to you about hunting public or that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Georgia Afield's just a website that I developed just to focus on Georgia hunting. I've always, which is how I got into this communications job with QDMA, I've just always had an interest in playing around with websites, designing websites, social media, that kind of stuff. And there just wasn't a whole lot out there as far as a Georgia hunting website. It was just all, focused on that one niche. So I decided to put together or create Georgia Afield and georgiaafield.com. And it's just kind of a clearinghouse of information on hunting in Georgia. Try to add content to it fairly regular and going to try to do more so here in the future. Not just specifically Georgia hunting, but just some hunting information in general type, deer hunting and turkey hunting type articles. But for somebody that's interested in hunting Georgia or public land in Georgia, you can definitely find about anything you would need to there. And as well as on our, the associated social media pages to go along with that.
Yeah, and we don't have time to get into this, but one of the things I even wanted to ask you about was that Georgia deer baiting proposal that passed, and I know you've got an article up on there about that. So, and I'm sure there's some comments and stuff on social media too. So, and then what about QDMA information? What are the QDMA accounts that people need to be following on social media?
Yeah, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and they're all just at the QDMA. And of course, QDMA.com is our website. We got a ton of great information on there, over 400 articles on all various aspects of deer hunting and deer management, whitetail biology. And then we have a YouTube page as well, and that is the QDMA as well.
All right. Well, Brian, thanks so much. I'm sorry that we kept you up late tonight, but it was a good conversation. I enjoyed it, and it was worth the wait having you on. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. I enjoyed it as well.
Thanks, Brian. We'll see you next week.
Yep, absolutely. See you down on the bayou.
All right.
Yeah, really appreciate it, both of you guys. And I guess I'm solo on this one, but we're out down south.